Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Alzheimer's Live Chat. I'm Lakelyn Hogan, gerontologist and caregiver advocate with Home Instead Senior Care. Again, want to thank you so much for tuning in today. We're trying out a new time compared to our afternoon time. So again, thanks so much for joining us over your lunch hour. Our live chats are brought to you by Home Instead Senior Care, a network of locally owned franchise offices. The Home Instead Senior Care Network offers in-home care with an individualized approach to helping to keep your loved ones safe and independent at home. And to learn more, you can visit homeinstead.com. And before we get started with today's chat, I did want to go over a few housekeeping items. First and foremost, we want you to know that your lines are muted. We do that so it reduces background noise, and we also want you to go about your daily activities. So if you're throwing in a load of laundry or eating your lunch, don't worry, we can't hear you munching away, or starting the washing machine on our end. The dog barks, we can't hear it. So we want you to know that the lines are muted. But we do want to hear from you. We want your questions. So at any time, please feel free to type your questions into the question box on the screen. It should be on your right-hand side. There's no such thing as a silly question. And if you have a question that's maybe a little unrelated to the topic, don't hesitate to type that in. We're happy to address any and all questions that you might have, so don't be shy. And then you don't have to worry about taking notes because we will be recording this webinar and we will send it back out via email with a link. You can share the link, forward it on to a family member or friend if you think that they would benefit from hearing the live chat as well. So we will be, again, recording this and sending it out shortly after today's live chat. So we'll dive into the topic for today. We're going to be talking about practical ways for dementia care partners to find respite. We know that it's so important to get sleep and to take care of ourselves, but the million-dollar question is, how in the heck do we do that? So especially when we have so many responsibilities in addition to our caregiving role. Some caregivers are juggling, childcare or caring for a grandchild. Others may be working in addition to their many caregiving responsibilities. So how do you juggle all these roles and find respite? And then especially this time of year, the holidays, it can be a hectic time with the hustle and bustle, and it adds to a caregiver's already very full plate. So today, we are so lucky to have an expert with us that will give us some tips and resources on, again, how to find these practical ways to find respite. And our expert is Karen Garner. She's an Alzheimer's expert by experience. She was a caregiver for her husband, Jim, who passed away from early onset Alzheimer's disease in April of 2016. As the founder of the Garner Foundation to help dementia caregivers, she is passionate about educating doctors, lawyers, and lawmakers and anyone else that will listen about Alzheimer's and the toll that it takes on families. She started her blog, MissingJim.com, to become a face and voice for younger onset Alzheimer's disease. She and her 2 children have traveled to Washington, D.C. many times to advocate for research funding to bring awareness to those who can help facilitate change. Karen now lives in Newport News, Virginia, and she volunteers at her children's schools and also is a proud softball, field hockey, and baseball mom, in addition to a basketball coach for her son's team. So Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so honored and lucky to have you on our live chat.
Oh, thank you so much, Lakelyn, for having me. This is one of the highlights of my week. So I'm really excited to talk to you and to share so many great ideas about how caregivers can help themselves, because I think it is so important and I think it is overlooked by just about everyone except for the caregivers. So thank you for having such a great topic today for us to discuss.
Oh, well, the pleasure is truly all mine, and I can't believe that, you and I have been chatting over the course of the last really 2 years. You've been helping us with these live chats for the past 3 years, and you've just brought so much, wisdom and personal experience, and I just, again, want to thank you. In the spirit of the holidays, I always have this overwhelming feeling of gratitude, so I just want you to know, how much we enjoy you on these chats and want to thank you so much for joining us. I know this is kind of the last chat we'll have for a while, and so just wanted to let the audience know that we are such good friends of Karen, and Karen is such good friends of ours here at Home Instead, and we know that she'll continue on in her quest to educate really everyone from family caregivers themselves to the influential lawmakers in Washington, D.C. So I know it's kind of, I don't want to start off on a sad note, but we're excited to have you this one last time and wish you well in all those future endeavors.
Thank you, Lakelyn. And, you know, the pleasure and honor have been all mine, and I've learned so much along the way. And I just want to thank Home Instead for being so supportive and for really just being a great, great company to work with. And I've really enjoyed it. And for those of you listening that have been following our story, I am definitely, like Lakelyn said, going to continue to advocate and fight on behalf of those that are affected by the aging process, by dementia, and also for the caregivers who are having to take care of them. So don't worry, I'm not leaving the cause, because we are all in this together, my friend. So I'm really excited. So thank you so much for everything.
Oh, well, thank you, Karen. And you said, you know, you're not leaving the cause. And I hear a lot from family caregivers that once Alzheimer's has affected you, you will always kind of be a cause champion for this disease and for those that are going through similar experiences to what you went through as a caregiver. So I know a lot of other people out there. We actually have, you know, on our Facebook following, a lot of caregivers whose loved one may have passed, but they still engage because they know how much it meant to them to have, you know, those that went before them in the caregiving journey, helping them and coming alongside them. So again, thanks for continuing on in your journey. Pardon me. Okay, so if it's okay with you, Karen, I know we have some questions that are already coming in. So are you ready to get started?
I am ready.
All right. Well, this first question comes from Becky, and she says, how do I get time away for myself? I'm caring for my 87-year-old husband and our 14-year-old beloved fur baby, which I'm guessing is a dog or a cat, both of whom are loving and grateful for my 24/7 care that they both need. The problem is, when I'm gone for over 3 hours, both become very fretful and anxious, not eating, not doing anything except waiting for me to return. I know that I am blessed because neither of them give me a hard time with attitudes or demands, but you know, it's still something that she struggles with. So she says, thank you for being there for all of the caregivers with help and advice. And, you know, Becky really is asking, you know, how do I get away to take time for myself? And I hear lots of situations like this. We've had a couple questions come in about really just this, you know, broader question of how do you take time away from the caregiving role?
It's a great question. And Becky, thank you so much for sending that in, because it is definitely an issue, and it's hard. And, you know, you have to get that break for yourself. Sometimes, you know, just going to the grocery store, going to get your hair done, those types of things. And it just causes so much stress when, you know, whenever you're away from your home and when you're away from your husband and your fur baby, that, you know, while you're out doing your own thing, they're home and you don't know exactly what they're doing, but you are thinking that they are becoming anxious and, as you said, fretful and not eating and, you know, just having some issues. So that in turn affects you, Becky. And so the one thing I encourage you to do is do not stop with all of your activities for whatever reasons that you're leaving. Maybe you're going and having lunch with friends, or maybe you're going to water aerobics, which would be great, or some kind of class that you like to go to, or maybe it is just running those daily errands that you need to do. I encourage you to go ahead and keep doing that as best as you can. And there won't be a way for you to change the behavior of your husband or your fur baby. I don't know. I don't want to say dog and it's a cat, and I don't want to say cat and it's a dog. So I'll just keep saying fur baby. But I have to say that's not a word I use every day. So I would just encourage you to continue doing what you're doing and to try to keep them as calm as possible. If you can keep it under the 3 hours, if you know that's sort of the cutoff point, please do that. If you have somebody that you trust, maybe a neighbor or a family member, somebody from your church that your husband and your beloved pet are comfortable with, maybe they can come by and distract them, or just keep an eye on them and try to help them remain calm and keep them from getting anxious. Hopefully you do have somebody that can come by and sort of relieve you. Even if they're not there when you leave, they can't stay the whole 3 hours. Maybe if they can come towards the end of the time that you're going to be gone, maybe for the last hour or two, once you get to that 3 hour point, and they will be able to come in and help alleviate some of those problems that you're having. But it is very important for you to continue to live your life and take care of yourself and go to your doctor's appointments and go and see your friends and socialize and be able to do the things that keep you active and involved in your own life. So thank you so much, Becky, for sending that great question in.
You bring up a lot of great points there. I think it's so easy for caregivers to really put themselves on the back burner, and their time is the first to, or their respite or away time is the first to kind of go by the wayside when these types of situations arise. So trying to find strategies to get around that, maybe anxiety of the loved one. I liked your suggestion, Karen, of asking somebody to come over, or maybe engage them in an activity that they like closer to the end of the 3 hour period, just to really kind of help get through that little anxious period. So great suggestions. And one thing that you had said, Karen, that actually points us to a question that came in was the idea of trust. And Laura wrote in and she says, trust is in my nature. She trusts everyone. She said, with that said, she has been stung. How do I trust someone I don't know to come into my home and care for my mom who is so vulnerable? So Karen, do you have any advice for family caregivers who are considering having somebody come into the home? Maybe that is a hired home care company employee, or maybe a volunteer from church, something of that nature. Or I guess, what advice would you have for Laura, who has this kind of fear of trusting?
Right. Laura, this is extremely common. We hear this a lot through our chats with caregivers. And, whether you're having somebody help you care for your child or your parent or your spouse, whether they're coming to your home or they're living in a facility, you always have that trust issue. No matter what the situation is, when you lose control over taking care of your loved one, it's someone that means a great deal to you, obviously, and that, when you're there, how you're going to treat them and how you're going to take care of them, and that they are going to have all of their needs and safety concerns met. So the trust issue is extremely important. So one of the first steps is and for this question, we're going to be discussing having people come to your home because that's what you asked about, Laura, is to definitely interview people before you have them stay in your home without you there. You can come and just have them come to the house and to meet them and just get a feel for them and see how your mom reacts to them, because that's very important too. And you do have the options, like Lakelyn said. It could be a family member. It can be a care company like Home Instead. It could also be somebody that you know through church or that somebody else has recommended. There's just a lot of people that help take care of elderly family members, but they don't necessarily work for a company. Now, that being said, when you go through a company like Home Instead, they've been trained, they've had background checks, and all kinds of what's the word I'm looking for? Like they have gone and helped other people. So they have, you know, a lot of experience
screening
behind them.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good word for it.
Thank you. I had a brain fart there. Sorry. I'm entitled in 3 years to have a brain fart. So,
of course.
Anyway, so one of the things to think about is if you go with somebody independent and they don't show up when they're supposed to, you have no recourse. You have nobody to call to come, you know, to get somebody else to come and so forth. When you go through a company, not only do you have the screening and the training and so forth, you also, if they don't show up, you know, you have a company and you have people to call and they can get somebody else there. But through that company, you can always ask for very specific things about a caregiver. You know, if you want a man or a woman, if you want somebody that will be active with them. So there's a lot of options, and you definitely want to think about what you're looking for in a caregiver. And it's very important to keep in mind, you may love someone, and then when you leave them with your mom and you're not there, your mom could complain when they get back that she didn't like them and she didn't like somebody in her house. So it's twofold. You have to like them and trust them, and your mom has to feel comfortable with them as well. And the same will go with anybody that you have, like we mentioned, somebody from church or a neighbor or a friend. So you have to take that all into consideration, and do try to have the same person come on a regular basis so that your mom doesn't get confused having a bunch of random people coming through her home, you know, where she's living. Sometimes that can affect somebody suffering from dementia, where they just don't like this stranger coming in their house. And it could even be somebody that they know, but they consider them to be a stranger. So that's also something to take into consideration. But your first step is going to be determining how you want to go about where you're going to try to find the people that are going to be coming in, and then meet with them before you leave them alone with your mom. Sort of do an interview process like you would if you were hiring somebody, if you owned a business. So that's very important as well, and see if you like them and if you have a good relationship with them before you leave and have to worry when you're not there about your mom and this person. So that's a great question, Laura, and I hope that my answer has helped you, even though I did have the brain fart, but I think you get the gist of it.
Yeah, those are all great suggestions. And then I think too, Karen, another piece of that is when you do have somebody come in to kind of relieve you or give you that respite, it's important to make sure that we prepare that person. You know, if mom really loves a certain TV show or type of music or an activity, to equip that person with that information to make the respite enjoyable for them and mom as well while you're away. Because I know in the previous question, they talked about how anxious they would get when the caregiver left the home. But if you're able to kind of give that person who's relieving you, that whether it's you know, professional help or the volunteer or the neighbor, give them a little background on, you know, what really works for my loved one, what keeps them engaged, what makes them happy. If they get a little upset, here's a little trick to kind of turn their mood around. That can also really help the situation. And I think it also kind of can give the caregiver peace of mind that I'm not leaving them, you know, with no instructions whatsoever. I'm equipping them with tools to make the respite successful, kind of for both parties. In addition to your tips, Karen, I think that, you know, preparing that person can also be a helpful tip.
That is a great suggestion, Lakelyn. Great suggestion. Thank you for adding that.
Of course. Well, we just had another question come in. So again, if you've recently joined us, please feel free to type in a question at any time. There's a question box on your screen. But Bev wrote in, she said, I have trouble finding resources to help me get away for respite because I've left my job due to my 24/7 care for my 88-year-old mother. She said finances are always a concern. She says, I'm grateful for Hilarity for Charity, which has been a blessing with free respite hours, but are there other resources available? And then Bev says, thanks so much for your time. So I can speak a little bit to Hilarity for Charity, but Karen, I wanted to ask you first, any other suggestions for Bev on financial resources for finding respite care or care in general for people who are caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia?
Definitely. And I'm so glad you brought up that you're going to talk about Hilarity for Charity. That's great, Lakelyn. So I'll leave you to that. There are some other options. I think you said the person writing in this question was Bev.
Yes, Bev.
Is that correct? Okay. Okay. Hi, Bev. Thank you so much for writing in. And so one of the first places you can start is the Alzheimer's Association in your area. There should be a local chapter. You can go to alz.org, and each chapter usually has some kind of grant program to help with respite care. And so definitely reach out to them. And then also in your local area, you should have a National Institute on Aging program or Agency on Aging program. And they usually, not only do they provide programs with respite care, but they usually know all of the programs in your area. So I know we have listeners all over the country. Sometimes, we have listeners up in Canada and other countries as well. So I am just going to refer to the United States here. But definitely, there's a lot of options depending on where you live. So Bev, since I'm not really sure exactly where you are, I wouldn't be able to look this information up for you. But you can definitely reach out to your Alzheimer's Association, and they should know all of the programs in your area, as well as, like I mentioned, the local Agency on Aging. Sometimes AARP might know some programs in your area as well. And I know sometimes in your local city, there are senior citizen programs that you can utilize as well for respite care. I know with my husband, Jim, there was a church here, and actually it was about a 45-minute drive, and they had a respite program. It did cost money, but they had a scholarship program that we were able to utilize. So even if a program costs money, sometimes there are ways to get, scholarships or grants to help cover the cost for that. And that was an excellent program that we participated in there as well. So there's probably a lot of options wherever you live. Churches a lot of times can help with that as well, and volunteers. People that have been through this process a lot usually do try to give back to other caregivers by volunteering to help with respite, because they realize and recognize how truly important it is. So I'm sorry, I can't give you specifics for your area, but I am so glad that you are taking advantage of Hilarity for Charity. And I understand about having to leave your job due to the 24/7 care for your mom, and I commend you for that. I was in the same position. I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. But I definitely want to encourage you to Google, use your computer and Google options in your area and reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. So great luck, Bev, and I'm so glad you're able to stay home and take care of your mom.
Those are some great suggestions, Karen. And you had brought up a day program, and we really haven't touched on that, but that we talked a lot about having somebody come to your home. But another great option for respite for some people is taking their loved one to an adult day center for a couple hours, maybe one day a week, something of that sort. And I think the same resources you mentioned, the Alzheimer's Association, the Area Agency on Aging, they should be able to direct you in your local community to the different day services or day programs out there. So in addition to the great information Karen just gave, though, a day program could be a great option. And then Hilarity for Charity, Bev, I'm glad that you've been able to take advantage of that program. Hilarity for Charity is a partnership that Home Instead Senior Care has, where we provide respite grants. And so families can apply for free respite care on helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. And I'll share that resource at the end of the webinar. And it is an application-based process, so you can go on there to apply for respite care, and it's in partnership with Seth and Lauren Rogan. Seth is an actor, so is Lauren, and her mom had Alzheimer's disease, and so, or has, she's still living, and so they've created this Respite Grant program really to give back, because as Karen says, a lot of people who go through it want to be able to give back to others that are also going through something similar. So again, I'll share that resource at the end and mention it, but please, if you are in need of respite care, please go out and apply. And it is really kind of a needs-based application, so you'll have to provide quite a bit of detailed information, but as Bev mentioned, the respite provided through that program can be very helpful. So I did want to let you all know about that program as well. And Karen, you mentioned having to give up your job to care for your husband. And we actually had a question come in from Tammy, and she says, how do I balance my care responsibilities with my work responsibilities? And I know that I talk to a lot of family caregivers who are trying to juggle a full-time career in addition to juggling, the caregiving role. So any tips or suggestions there for Tammy on how she can better maybe manage or balance, or is it acceptable in today's day and age to talk to your employer about this? I know, child care is a norm, but caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia, that might not be talked about as much. I think it's becoming more common, but I'd love to get your thoughts and tips for Tammy on this topic.
Most definitely, and you hit the nail on the head. As society is aging and more people are in the position where they are having to look for help caring for their parents, I think it is becoming more and more common not only to have programs to help with this, but also just to discuss it and to get help. And, as was mentioned, I did have a situation. I was working full time because, of course, Jim had to stop working. And as the disease progressed, I felt more and more stressed because I had a stressful job and I had goals and deadlines and things that I had to meet on a quarterly basis. And it became more and more difficult to do my job well. I could do it, but I could tell a difference from the day I started until my last day. Although I was still good at my job, I wasn't great at my job. And just for me personally, knowing that, that in itself caused stress. I mean, there are so many different things about this situation that caused stress. It's amazing I didn't have a heart attack or a stroke. Mm-hmm. But I definitely understand where you're coming from, Tammy. And there's a couple ways to look at this. So my job was not flexible, and they were very aware of what was happening with Jim. They were sympathetic, but they still expected me to do my job and do it to my abilities that I had been doing previously. But then I would get calls from Jim, or calls from the kids, because our kids were younger, and there was just a lot of situations that were coming up, not just with Jim, but with the children. And I also felt the burden of them becoming the caregivers for their dad. And at that time, they were like 7 and 10 years old. And so it was just very difficult to think about the responsibility. What if something happened to Jim and my kids were there, and the guilt and the feelings that would cause long term. So in my particular situation, and probably many others out there dealing with early onset Alzheimer's, where you have children at home, and it could also be if your parent is living with you and you have your children at home, and you're a sandwich caregiver, you're stuck right there in the middle. It could be the same situation where you don't want to put that burden on your children, or children that are in the home. And so it just was very difficult. It was a hard decision, but it got to the point where I did, Jim progressed, and I needed to decide to stay home and be a parent. Of course, that financially was a huge burden to our family. But sometimes there are jobs you can do from home, just depending on how it is at home as far as being the caregiver, how much time you end up having. Maybe you can find a different job. Now, talking to your employer, I know that that can seem difficult, but it's really important for you to communicate with them and for them to understand. There are government, guidelines as well. So I think, Lakelyn, you probably have some great tips on that, because I know that's one of your things that you've done a lot of research on. So if you could help me out with this, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this topic seems to be popular because we had another question come in from Karen. Two Karens going on here, but Karen in our audience, she said she finds herself taking a lot of time off of work for her mom's appointments, and she says, "What tips can you give me for my employer?" So I'm certainly happy to offer up some additional tips. And Homestead recently did quite a bit of research on this topic, and we find that daughters especially are more prone to take on this caregiving role. They're really unproportionally affected by this caregiving role. So we created a Daughters in the Workplace program, and the resource is daughtersintheworkplace.com. And on that site, we really created some conversation guides, some great tips and resources for working family caregivers. And this goes for both male and female, of course, but we, again, knew that daughters were affected most frequently. So on there, there are tips on how you can have a conversation with your employer to help them understand your caregiving role. And perhaps, Karen, for you, it's having a conversation about maybe a little more flexible scheduling. Maybe instead of taking your lunch hour at the regular time, you can adjust it to make it to your mom's appointment. Or Karen, it might be an opportunity for you to talk with your mom about, is there, I'm not trying to because it's really important to go with your loved one to an appointment, but could you utilize a service to help get your mom to the doctor so you could meet her there for the appointment, that sort of thing. So I think that this is a very delicate topic, because oftentimes people don't want their employer to look at them differently or think, oh, well, we can't give them a certain project because they can't handle it because they're caregiving for a loved one. I think it's really an opportunity for caregivers to have a conversation, an honest conversation with their employer about, they still want to be engaged in their career, but if they're able to be a little bit flexible, it could really help them maintain that kind of work-life balance and maintain both roles as an employee and caregiver. So again, encourage you, Karen, to go out there to help daughtersintheworkplace.com. I apologize. And we can send that link out with the recording of today's webinar. But that's a great resource. So thanks, Karen, for that question, and thanks, Karen Garner, for your tips for the audience and when it comes to employers. Any other thoughts on that, Karen?
There is. So thank you. And it's that, I guess we're having to get used to this new time here, because we're both stumbling over our words a little bit. So thanks for making me feel better, Lakelyn. I did want to remind all of our listeners that if you are going through this same thing where you're trying to decide about your job and staying home versus staying home with your loved one, it's really important for you to look at your job, not just financially. Sometimes you can't afford to quit your job, and that's understandable, but also socially, to keep yourself from becoming isolated. So if you can you keep your job and maybe hire somebody, like Lakelyn said, to come in and take over the caregiving responsibilities while you're at work. But if you do decide to stay home, what is that going to look like for you and your health, not just your physical health, but your mental health as well? Are you still going to be able to get out and socialize and talk to people and exercise and do some of the things that help keep you mentally sharp and capable? So I think that's also a really good point to think about when you are making this decision.
Oh, Karen, that's an excellent point. That's not something I really had considered before. Work or a career provides many opportunities to exercise our minds, some occupations, our bodies, socially interacting, and caregivers do have a risk for isolation. So if you do have to leave your job, I would encourage caregivers to really think through, what is my respite plan or my socialization plan going to be? Because it is so important to make sure that you get that time for yourself and get that time to socialize and talk to others. So many great tips and resources that we're chatting about today. So I hope that everyone listening is taking a lot away from this chat. I know I'm learning some new stuff too. And we did have another question come in from Peggy. She said, how do I get my mom out of the house when my father is 150% dependent on her, to the point that he will leave the home to go find her when she leaves? This means that she has to come back early, or she can't even leave the house at times. Sometimes it doesn't work when there's a caregiver there. So she says, would this be a sign that home might not be the place for him anymore? Or do you have any other suggestions for Peggy? Karen, I know that just based on some conversations we had, I believe Jim maybe wandered at times too. So any suggestions for her on how she can really help her mom get the respite? I know caregivers play many roles. There's kind of the primary caregiver, and a lot of times adult children can be that secondary caregiver too. And you want to help, your mom or your dad who's caring for the person with Alzheimer's get some needed respite. So I guess I made that a twofold question. How can we help other caregivers get the respite they need, and then how can Peggy specifically get some tips on how to kind of help with this dependency issue or the wandering issue?
Oh, thank you so much, Peggy, for writing in and for listening. I hope that you're having a great day. So this is a really tough question, and it is actually very common. As people progress with dementia, sometimes they get very quiet, sometimes they get agitated, and sometimes they get very attached to specific people. And that seems to be the case here. Your dad is attached to your mom, and when she's away, his security blanket is gone. That's basically what she is for him. He's comfortable with her, he knows her, and if you can put yourself in the position of someone who is facing dementia, whatever form it is, it's very scary, because there are times that they are aware of what is happening and what's going on. And then there's other times that they're not. And there's times that they know that they're declining and they know that there's a problem. It's very, very scary for them. And especially if maybe she's the one person that he feels safe with and comfortable with, that is what he's going to look for, to know that no matter what, no matter if he forgets or he falls or whatever, that she's going to be there. So it's, as a caregiver, it's always very important to try to keep in mind the point of view of the person that you are taking care of, simply because it just helps you as a caregiver with your empathy and your patience and your understanding, which at times can be tested to the full limit. So Peggy, one of the things you can look into are some specific locks on the door, so that your dad can't wander when she's gone, or even when she is home. He may start to do that as well. So it's really important that you have some locks on the door. If you don't want to do that, some people use, just depending on how it would affect your dad, some people it would not, and some people it does, but some people use black rugs in front of doors, because people with dementia sometimes see that, and instead of seeing a rug, they see a hole in the ground that they feel like they're going to fall through. And there's some other ideas that you can do as well. You can actually take the door and change the front door so that it doesn't look like an outside door. There's some people that have done that. Or you can take a door to their bedroom and make it look like an outside door. it just depends on your father and your situation. So there are some things that you can do to try to keep him from wandering, for his safety and your mom's safety. And it is important for her to continue to get out and to have that respite. And I'm so glad that you're focused on that and you're looking to help her out with that. So definitely continue to do that. And if he does get agitated, there are medications that you can give him. I'm not a big proponent of just medicating up our patients. I actually really am not even comfortable saying that, but it is an option if needed for any scenario. It's really good to talk to their physician. He should have a neurologist that he is seeing. And you can talk to them and see if there's something just to calm him that you could take. Maybe your mom could give him that before she leaves so that he won't wander or he won't get agitated. And that way she doesn't have to come back early. So I think that's really important to throw out there on the table. And also, see if you can get him distracted, whoever is staying with him. As Lakelyn mentioned earlier, it's a great idea to have whoever's staying with your loved one have some tips for them on things that they enjoy, whether it's a specific TV show, putting a puzzle together. If there's a pet in the home, they maybe can go for a walk, or they can have, if they have a lap dog, have the lap dog sit in their lap, play some music. A lot of times music therapy is wonderful, especially if it's songs that they hear that they know and they can sing the words to. Art therapy is great. So there are other options possibly to get him so that he gets distracted and doesn't recognize that your mom's not there. And then he may come around, so you might be able to distract him for a few minutes or maybe half an hour, and then he comes back to it, and then you might have to do something else to distract him again. So you might want to have a few tricks up your sleeve and not just rely on one. But it's really important, though, to keep him from wandering just for safety. And now this time of year, it's really getting cold out there. There's snow, there's ice. I'm not sure where you're at, but most of the country got snow this past weekend. So I definitely encourage you to make sure he doesn't do that, especially through these harsh winter months. So Lakelyn, I'm sure you have some great ideas on this one as well.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, you covered a lot of what I was going to say, so I don't really have anything additional to add to this one, but I know that this can be challenging, but I think it's so important that Peggy, your mom, does get the opportunity for respite. So if your dad's comfortable with you even, Peggy, maybe there's a day a week or an evening night that you could go over and give your mom a little respite if your dad's comfortable with you even. Sometimes, like Karen mentioned, familiarity is a comfort. So if your dad is always really attached to your mom, it's probably because he feels really comfortable around her. So in addition to what Karen said, maybe Peggy, this is an opportunity for you to step in a little bit if you're able to provide some additional respite. But great question, Peggy, and we wish you all the best in your situation. We also had another question come in from, I think it's Luz, and she said, my mom just lost her husband and he was her primary caregiver. So now she has had to step in. She said, I find at times she remembers that he is gone and gets very sad, but there are times when she starts to look for him. Any suggestions? Oh, wow, Karen, this is a sad situation. So sorry, Luz, that you lost your father or your mother's husband, and that's tough. So Karen, any tips for Luz on this topic?
Most definitely, and my sympathies as well, Luz. I'm wondering if that's a typo and it's supposed to be Liz, but either way.
Oh, it might be.
It might be Luz or Liz, whoever. Thank you, first of all, for writing in and listening. And again, I'm very sorry about your mom's husband. And this is actually something that is another common theme that comes up when I'm talking to caregivers. And actually, I went through something very similar with my grandmother. My grandmother passed away this past year, and she was 96. Well, in the year before, her husband passed away. And a lot of times she would say to us, you know, that he was in the back room, that he was upstairs, and they lived in a rancher, so they didn't even have an upstairs. Sometimes she would say he was gone to the store and he would be back any minute. And so it's extremely sad and heartbreaking, because you know, and first of all, you're sad for them, and then you're sort of in a predicament, you know, each time that they say this. Should you correct them? Should you remind them of the loss that they have? And, you know, this is a very debatable topic, and I've heard some great arguments both ways. I've heard, yes, you should tell them, you should never lie to them. And there's some people that feel very, very adamant about that. And then there's some people that are like, if it keeps her happy and it, you know, keeps her from getting sad, does it really matter? Just don't tell her that he's passed away, and, you know, say he's going to the store, agree with her, or so forth. So I just wanted to bring that up because, you know, like I said, it's a debate that goes back and forth both ways. And so that's going to be whatever you are comfortable with your mom. And so back to specifics about her getting very sad, and that when she remembers, you know, that would be sad for all of us. You know, my husband passed away, and I know, you know, when I'm out with friends, you know, sometimes he pops in my mind and I get sad, or I'll hear a song. You know, I was at a party this past year after Jim passed away, and our song that we did our first dance to came on. They were playing it in the background, and I teared up. I started crying, and my good friends were like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong?" I was like, "Oh, this is me and Jim's song." And, you know, my friend hollered to her husband in the other room to change the song. And I was like, no, it's okay. It's a good sad. And because I had that love, and it was just remembering him. So it is part of life to be sad when you lose someone, no matter what age you lose them. And so it also causes the people around you that care about you to be sad as well. And they want to help you and make you feel better. And that's exactly where you're at, Luz. And you want to keep your mom from hurting and from being sad, which is very commendable. But unfortunately, there's no way that you can really keep people from being sad. What you can do is try to remind them of the great times, try to remind them that they are loved, try to keep them active and engaged. If your mom is able to do any kind of activities, try to help her do that. Music, photo albums, and share stories about her husband. It's good to talk about them. I know sometimes it can be awkward to talk about somebody that's no longer with us, but I feel like I'm doing a disservice to Jim if I never bring him up, or I don't share memories with our kids or our friends. But it can also make other people feel awkward when you talk about someone that's passed away. So I think it's super important for you to do what feels comfortable for you at that moment. If you are comfortable telling your mom, you know, that he has passed away, and just sit there with her while she gets sad and cries, let her do that. And if you don't want to tell her and she is looking for him, help her look for him and say, oh, he went to the store, or he had a doctor's appointment, or, you know, he went for a walk, and then try to distract her so that she'll forget that she was looking for him. So it's really what you're comfortable with. And I'm sure you may have to change from day to day which one of those scenarios that you're going to follow. So thank you for sending that in. And I'm really sorry about your mom's husband.
Karen, those are some great suggestions. And yeah, one of my favorite suggestions in these situations are to remember the good things about the loved one that has passed, because even if that person is sad, you're hopefully bringing them to kind of a happy memory. So whether you tell them the truth, or if you, you know, maybe say that they're at the store or they're on vacation and they'll be back soon. Talking about the happy memory in both situations can really hopefully bring that person some joy. So Karen, thanks so much for those suggestions. And thanks so much, Luz, for writing in. And then I did want to, it looks like we have time for about one more question. And we had Margaret write in, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase her situation because she did write in kind of a long description, but it all really deals around the topic of sleep. And I think that is a topic, you know, for a lot of caregivers, sleep is a luxury. Maybe their loved one is up all night or has trouble getting to bed. In Margaret's case, her husband does nap quite a bit throughout the day, which might throw off his sleep schedule at night. But she also says, you know, once he's in bed, that's kind of my me time. But I know I'm kind of sacrificing my own sleep. So, Karen, any thoughts on caregiving and sleep? I could see where, as a caregiver, that would be such a struggle because it is finding like some time for yourself, but you know that sleep is good for you. It's an opportunity for your body to recharge and regenerate, and it'll give you energy for the next day. So, any thoughts for Margaret on this topic of sleep?
Definitely. And Margaret, I do feel your pain for sure. I went through the same thing with Jim, and I went through the same thing with him, but also I'm a night owl. So for me and my body and my mind to try to go to bed early was very difficult. And also, just like you, that was my me time when Jim finally went to bed and the kids went to bed. So I had to get him to bed and the kids, and then I was exhausted, and that was my time to write my blog, or maybe I had some work I had to do at home, or do some laundry, or sometimes just sit in bed and watch a TV show, or read a book. I also loved to read books. So I totally get that it would make sense to say, oh, we'll just go to bed when he goes to bed, or take a nap when he takes a nap. But it is important for you to get that me time. So the only thing I can suggest as far as making sure you get your sleep is to try to get those naps in if possible, if he is taking any naps during the day, and to try to get yourself on some kind of regular schedule around what his schedule is, which I know it could change day to day. You don't know what it's going to be, but it is really important for you to get your sleep and your alone time. And another suggestion, sometimes people bring in help through the night. So, you know, maybe you don't need help with him during the day, but maybe you can have somebody come during the night that will get up with him and keep him safe and take care of him while you do get your sleep. And sometimes spouses end up staying in different bedrooms when this happens. I know that's not really an optimal option, but sometimes that's what happens because you wake up when they get up, or they might see you there and wake you up. So you just have to look at your very specific situation, and you have to try to determine what the best answer is for you guys. And it might change. If you come up with an answer for any of these things we've discussed today, you can come up with an answer, and tomorrow or next week, you might have to revisit the same exact situation and come up with a different answer. So it's good to keep your mind open and keep your options open. Don't get set in your ways so that it's just this one specific thing. But I definitely, you need to look at your situation, because I know you sent in your question, and I know Lakelyn had paraphrased it, but you know, it's 5 a.m. and that's when you're going to sleep. And so your sleep cycle is going to be off completely. And that's not going to be good for you. And that's going to affect your health and your mental capacity, and your ability to be a caregiver. So I think you really need to look at that. Lakelyn, do you have any suggestions for her as well?
I absolutely do. I was actually reading up on this topic lately, so it's really timely that Margaret wrote in. But I liked your suggestion, Karen, about sometimes you have to bring in help. Again, it could be a family member or a friend that stays over a couple nights a week, so you can get at least a couple quality nights of sleep. Or it could be bringing in, paid help, or maybe it's having somebody come in to help your loved one with their morning routine so you can sleep in a little bit. or come in and help with the evening routine. So while that person's helping with your loved one's evening routine, that's an opportunity for the caregiver to get their tasks done, the laundry, the extra work around the house. So that's one tip. But when it comes to, a lot of times, the sleep of the individual with Alzheimer's or dementia can really impact the sleep of the caregiver. So if you kind of focus on the sleep routine of the individual living with dementia, routine is really helpful. Making sure that they are going to bed within about a half hour, the same time within a half hour time frame each night, and waking at the same time can really help caregivers plan for, times when they can get their tasks done. If you know that your loved one goes to bed at between 7:30 and 8 every night, then you can kind of plan accordingly. And then a lot of times those with Alzheimer's will want to nap a lot during the day. But if you can really kind of let them nap primarily in the morning and prevent their napping in the afternoon, that can help them sleep better through the night. And then also, limiting their caffeine intake after lunchtime or their liquid intake, because a lot of times getting up to use the restroom in the night is a main cause of why they're having to get up, and then that forces the caregiver to get up to help them. So if you can limit liquids, in the evening time around bedtime, that can also be helpful. And one thing that a lot of times family caregivers don't think about is exercise during the daytime can be really helpful in helping their loved ones sleep through the night. So if you're able to get out for a walk, maybe in the fresh sunshine, we know light therapy is also very helpful for sleeping through the night. If they're maybe feeling kind of sleepy in the afternoon, instead of letting them take a nap, maybe you could encourage them to go for a walk outside instead. That could kind of help tire them out later in the day when it's actual bedtime. So those are just some things I've been reading up on. Again, that routine bedtime, a little exercise during the day, and light therapy even. Some caregivers go as far to buy a light therapy lamp, but just getting out in the fresh sunshine can be helpful, or sitting next to a window with some good natural light can be so helpful. And those are tips caregivers might not think of. And I'm going to actually move us to the resource slide on the next page, or on the next slide here, so that we can kind of reconnect with some of the suggestions or the resources that we've mentioned throughout today. HelpForAlzheimersFamilies.com, that's the site where you can apply for that Hilarity for Charity Respite Care Grant. DaughtersInTheWorkplace.com is that great employer-employee site where you can look for tips on how to talk to your employer about your caregiving duties. And then Karen had mentioned the Alzheimer's Association website at the very bottom of the page, alz.org. That's a good site. And then for the, we talked a lot about wandering. There is a great tool, MissingSeniorNetwork.com. That site's there. That website, you can kind of sign your loved one up, put in all of the contacts, neighbors, friends, family members, and then if your individual that you're caring for with Alzheimer's or dementia goes missing, you can easily from that site send out a message to all those contacts saying, hey, so-and-so has wandered, this is what they're wearing, this was the last place they were seen, can you please help us? And we have seen so many success stories of individuals being found pretty quickly due to that site. So even if you think that your loved one might wander in the future, a great resource there. And then if we go to the next slide quick, we do have a brand new chat scheduled for 2018, and our first one will be January 11th. We're going to try this noon time frame again to see, if that works better for our audience. So we're going to be talking about preparing for the long haul. Caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's is often a very long journey for some people. So Ann Tomlinson will be talking a little bit about that. So mark your calendars. And then again, just want to thank everyone so much for joining us. We apologize if we didn't get to your questions today, but please, we hope you continue to tune in with us. And Karen, thank you so much for your time today and over the past 3 years, again, just giving us so much of your wisdom and your life experience and encouragement. And on a personal note, I just admire you so much. And again, thank you for all you do in the Alzheimer's space, advocating for families, advocating for research. All of it is such important work. So thank you, Karen.
Oh, thank you so much, Lakelyn, and it has definitely been my pleasure. And I had a great time today. I hope we helped all of our listeners. And I just want to thank Home Instead again for doing this for caregivers and for giving me the opportunity to help. So thank you, Lakelyn. And I hope everybody who celebrates Hanukkah has a happy Hanukkah today and for the next 7 days. And everybody who celebrates Christmas has a Merry Christmas. And I hope 2018 is a great year for everyone as well.
Yes, I echo that. Happy holidays, everyone. And I noticed a typo on the screen. It will be January 11th, 2018. I'm still stuck in 2017, but so I apologize. It will be, the next chat will be next year. But again, I echo Karen. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you all in January. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Take good care of yourselves. Get that needed respite that you so deserve as a caregiver. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.